Hi everyone. Because we just had the Academy Awards a few weeks ago, I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the very first Oscar awarded for Best Original Song, especially since the winner and even the nominations are somewhat interesting and not what we might expect given the benefit of hindsight. Although not exactly controversial, the nature of the very first Best Original Song contest is interesting in retrospect and has multiple facets that are worth investigating. So today, let's take a look at the Academy Awards' very first Best Song. Although the first Academy Awards ceremony took place in 1929, it wasn't until 6 years later, in 1935, that the category of Best Original Song was introduced. This was also the first year for the related category of Best Original Score, as well as Best Film Editing, and while it seems like this was due to the evolving nature of the early Oscar ceremonies, it is nevertheless unfortunate that it took so many years for the Academy to recognize the music from these early films. This is because there were several musicals released in the first few years of sound films, and many iconic songs used in these films might have won Best Song if such an award had existed, such as Isn't It Romantic?, Puttin' on the Ritz, Happy Days Are Here Again, and almost any of the songs from 42nd Street, as well as many others. Regardless, on February 27, 1935, the 7th Academy Awards began the tradition of recognizing the Best Original Song. And at that ceremony, the films represented were those released in 1934. Interestingly, in contrast to a few years later, in 1938, when there were 10 Best Song nominations, only 3 songs were nominated in this inaugural year, with perhaps more obvious options going completely unmentioned. And strangely, one of those 3 actually coming from a film released in 1933. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers' first film, Flying Down to Rio, was released in December of 1933. I've seen either December 21st or 22nd as the date of the New York premiere, and I've also seen December 29th listed as the general US premiere. Regardless, every date I've seen refers to this movie as a 1933 film. Now, this should have put it outside the eligibility period of the 1934 calendar year, but for some reason it was included anyway. I haven't been able to discover why this was the case, but the song nominated from the film is at least historically significant, so perhaps it's good that it was nominated. Carioca, with music by Vincent Youmans and lyrics by Edward Eliscu and Gus Kahn, is best known nowadays as being the very first song danced to by Fred and Ginger together, and its success in the film led to the further partnership of those two and all that that partnership yielded. This song is also somewhat popular today within jazz circles, but of course at the time of its nomination, this and the extent of its impact as Fred and Ginger's first song would have been unknown. In addition to Carioca, 2 other songs were nominated for Best Original Song that year. One of these was Love in Bloom from She Loves Me Not. This song, with music by Ralph Ranger and lyrics by Leo Robin, was sung in the film by Bing Crosby and Kitty Carlisle, and is a nice little romantic ballad, but it's virtually unknown today.
And it be the spring that seems to bring the stars right into this room. Oh no, it isn't the spring, it's love in bloom.
Perhaps its most lasting legacy is as the theme song of iconic radio and television host and comedian Jack Benny. The other song nominated was The Continental, from Fred and Ginger's second film, The Gay Divorcee. This song, with music by Con Conrad and lyrics by Herb Magidson, is fun, upbeat, and very catchy, and was given a huge dance number in the film, which lasted well over 10 minutes. It's danced to by Fred and Ginger, as well as a large ensemble, and is sung multiple times by 3 different singers, including Ginger Rogers.
It's something daring, the Continental, a way of dancing that's really ultra new. It's very subtle, the Continental, because it does what you want it to do.
But despite the treatment this song is given in the film, it also, like the other nominations, is not terribly popular today. Now, of course, all 3 songs were much more popular back in 1934, with all 3 charting for several weeks and each having multiple covers recorded and released that year. So, out of these 3 songs, Carioca, Love in Bloom, and The Continental, which one ended up winning that coveted first Best Original Song Oscar? It was The Continental. And in my opinion, when compared to the other two nominations, it's easy to see why. The Continental is just a bit more fun and upbeat. It has a great dance number to go along with it, which is both longer and more intricate and interesting than the karaoke's dance. And at least for me, the song is incredibly catchy, and I find myself whistling it for the rest of the day after I've listened to it. But what is most interesting to me is not how the Continental beat the other songs nominated, but how only those three songs were nominated, when there were several others that seemed to me to be just as good, or just as popular, if not more so at the time, and whose legacies are much greater and longer lasting today. Now, the rules for that 7th Academy Awards did state that there could only be 3 songs nominated, but when we start to look at other songs from films released in 1934, it quickly becomes apparent that this limit should have been higher, as the Academy had several other options that could and probably should have been nominated. Some of these include On the Good Ship Lollipop, sung by Shirley Temple in Bright Eyes, All I Do Is Dream of You, from Sadie McKee, and known today mostly for its inclusion in 1952's Singin' in the Rain. The beautiful I Only Have Eyes for You, from Dames, and The Bad in Every Man, from Manhattan Melodrama, an early version of the iconic Rodgers and Hart song Blue Moon, with a different set of lyrics. For more on that story, see my video, A History and Analysis of Blue Moon. But perhaps the most egregious omission was a song which came from the same film as the ultimate winner. The Gay Divorcee was actually an adaptation of the stage musical Gay Divorce, a show which ended up being Fred Astaire's last appearance on Broadway, and which contained multiple songs by popular songwriter Cole Porter. However, for the film version, they decided to include only one of the Cole Porter songs from the original show, and supplement that one with 4 new songs, including, of course, the Continental. But the one song that was brought over from the original show is perhaps one of Cole Porter's most famous songs and one of the most iconic Origipop songs of all time, Night and Day. Now, perhaps some of you are saying to yourself, wait a minute, if Night and Day was in an earlier show and not written for the film specifically, then it wouldn't be eligible for an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song. But actually, that rule didn't come about until almost a decade later, after controversy at the 1942 Academy Awards. But I'll discuss that story in a future video, so stay tuned. So, at the 1935 Oscars, there was no rule yet to bar Night and Day from receiving a Best Song nomination or win. And in my opinion, it is certainly one of the best songs heard in a film from that year. It's as romantic as Love in Bloom, as catchy as the Continental, and has a dance sequence which, although not as long or extensive as the Continental, or as iconic or historically significant as Karaoke, is extraordinarily beautiful and elegant nonetheless, and to me, shows through dance Ginger Rogers' character falling in love with the character played by Fred Astaire.
Cigarette?
But this video is about the first Best Song, and so putting aside all those other songs, both nominated and not, let's now take a look at the ultimate winner, the Continental. And let's start by looking at the song itself, outside of its context in the film, by looking at the original published sheet music. We can see here right off the bat that this song doesn't quite look like most other Origipop songs from the time. In fact, this song has a very interesting structure, which is quite different than most other songs of the day. Now, although it looks a bit unusual on this first page, it actually doesn't start out too differently, as it sort of has a 4-bar piano intro, then an 8-bar vocal introduction. But it's not really an introductory verse like most other songs have, and interestingly, the vocal part is not reproduced in the piano part, as most other songs from the time and the rest of this song do. In fact, the balance of piano to vocals throughout this song is a little different than most other Origipop songs as well, as there are multiple measures throughout the song which are piano only. And actually this contributes in part to the song's unusual number of measures. See, after this introduction, the song doesn't follow the standard 32-bar AABA form that so many others did, but is instead sort of split into 2 halves, each in a different key, and each of which consists of about 36 bars with a 4-bar transition between them. Interestingly, those 2 halves do seem to each almost follow an AABA form. The first half, as we can see here, certainly does, while the second half, shown here, is more like an A, partially sequenced A, B, then altered and expanded A form. Then after all this, the song ends with 10 or 8, depending on how you want to count it, measures, which repeat that vocal introduction from the beginning, making this less like an introduction and more like a bookend, starting and finishing off the song. Overall, it's quite a bit different than most other Origipop songs, but it is very fun and enjoyable nonetheless. The two main sections fit together and complement each other very well, as there are similar rhythmic elements in both, and both are equally catchy. Now, let's quickly take a look at the lyrics. The title of the song and much of the lyrics are referring to the Continental, which within the song and film is a dance. The film is set in England, and the song and dance are supposedly
The newest thing over here.
presumably coming from the continent, or the mainland of Europe, in contrast to the British Isles. The lyrics of the song tell us more about the dance. It's a daring and new way of dancing. It has passion, and it helps you tell of your love for your partner. The subtitle of the song is also the first line of the second half of the song, and says that in this dance, you kiss while you're dancing, and that sort of behavior is very continental. But the lyrics also refer to the song itself, and says that the Continental is the song of romance and of love, and has beautiful music and a dangerous rhythm. A rhythm which gets into your heart and soul and which you can't control. Overall, the song is very self-referential. The lyrics don't talk about abstract ideas of love or showcase fancy and ornate language, but instead simply describe the song itself and the dance that you see in the film. And in fact, the connection between the song and dance is so strong that the back cover of the original published sheet music featured actual photographs of the steps done in the dance. So now let's actually take a look at that dance as it was presented in the film, The Gay Divorcee. As mentioned previously, the dance number for this song is incredibly long and comprised of multiple elements. The music is first heard in the film at about the 75-minute mark, and a few minutes later, Ginger Rogers sings the whole song to Fred Astaire, sans dancing. Then, as it continues to play in the background, their two characters figure out how to leave their room where they're sort of trapped. After they escape, they begin their first dance to the song as an instrumental arrangement is played in the background. They dance for about 2.5 minutes, and then are followed by a huge ensemble dance. This is a grand, beautifully choreographed, if slightly disjointed dance, which lasts for about 7 minutes, and which is occasionally intercut by two different characters, one of whom we've never seen before, singing more of the song. After all this, Fred and Ginger dance again for about another 2 minutes before the dance number finally ends. From the first time the song is heard to this point, the whole thing takes about 17 minutes. But the music and further dancing from Fred and Ginger is featured a bit later on in the film as well, as a sort of finale as the film ends. Fred and Ginger dance beautifully throughout the number, as they always do, and demonstrate what one analysis terms multi-ethnic versions, including a Spanish tango, Hungarian zardas, Viennese waltz, and a jazzy American bit. These different styles all come during their second dance number of the Continental, after the big ensemble sequence. But perhaps my favorite part comes at the end of the film, in the final scene, where they dance up onto a chair, then table, then seemingly float back down, with Ginger Rogers never touching the second chair on her way down. But the ensemble number is quite beautiful as well. It has several elements reminiscent of Busby Berkeley, with impressive staging, symmetry, and large-scale movement. There's also lots of interweaving, shots where the camera moves through the dancers, and impressive athletic elements from the dancers, as well as interesting artistic shots like this sequence of women spinning around within revolving doors. It's also very visually appealing because of the high contrast utilized. The members of the ensemble are all initially wearing either all black or all white outfits that are mixed and matched in a variety of visually pleasing ways. And then later on, there's a group of dancers that have half black and half white outfits as well, to change it up a bit. The whole effect is striking and impressive. The dance was choreographed by dance director and choreographer Dave Gould. Beyond this extensive dance number, he is also notable for being one of only 3 people who won an Oscar for the Academy's short-lived Best Dance Direction Award, although that was awarded for a different film at the next Academy Awards in 1936. Another feature of the dance sequence to mention is that during the dance, the song, as I mentioned previously, is sung by 2 separate characters. One of these is a major character in the film, while the other seems to be a random woman who we've never seen before and never see after. The actress is Lillian Miles, whose movie career outside of this film was mostly confined to low-budget B pictures. But what's interesting is that before she sings the second half of the song, the part that begins with "You Kiss While You're Dancing," she sings not the first half, but an additional section of the song that I haven't heard or seen anywhere else. It seems to be a section known at the time as either a trio or patter. These were found in a small number of Origipop songs, such as Gershwin's "Swanee" and Rodgers and Hart's "Mountain Greenery." Essentially, it is an additional part of the song that acts as sort of an interlude or an extended bridge. I haven't been able to find any sheet music which reflects this addition, but it looks somewhat like this. Like most trios of the time, it has a different feel musically. It's in a different key and has a very different rhythm, which matches more closely a traditional patter song. But the lyrics complement those in the rest of the song and talk about all the places throughout Europe that are enjoying the Continental. This section seems to be about 48 measures long, and it follows an AA, BA, altered A, C form. It is an interesting part of the song, but it doesn't appear on any published sheet music or on any of the covers of the song I've ever heard. It's probably just because the Continental is already quite long, longer than most other Origipop songs of the time because of its already unusual structure, and also because this section just isn't really that impactful or important. The music isn't as catchy and doesn't match the rest of the song, and while the lyrics are a bit better, they're ultimately just not needed. It works in the film because the scene is such an extensive grand spectacle, and so an additional section of the song seems to fit well, but outside of the film, it's ultimately just not necessary. And that seems to be supported by the figures, as even without the inclusion of this additional section, the song, due to its inherent merit as well as its iconic use in the film, was a hit as soon as it came out. The sheet music was a bestseller, and in 1934 alone, it received at least 6 covers, some of which charted for several weeks, including a version by Leo Reisman and his orchestra, which reached the #1 spot. And despite declining in popularity a bit afterwards, even decades later, it continued to receive covers from such iconic performers as Frank Sinatra, Eddie Fisher, Nat King Cole, and Rosemary Clooney. And it's even received multiple covers recently, with about 20 covers coming since the year 2000. It has also been heard in a couple films over the years as well, including 1940's City for Conquest, Bogus from 1996, and 2003's Mona Lisa Smile. So overall, the Continental, despite its unique and unusual structure, is a very fun and catchy song, was a hit at the time it came out, and has an impressive legacy that lasts to this day. But perhaps its most lasting legacy comes because of its unique position within Oscars history. Despite the fact that it might have faced a bit more headwind if the Academy had allowed more songs or perhaps nominated different songs than Love in Bloom and Karaoke, it's easy to see why the Continental was ultimately the winner of the Academy Awards' very first Best Song. Thanks for watching.
You will find while you're dancing that there's a rhythm in your heart and soul, a certain rhythm that you can't control, and you will do the Continental all